All right, so hello and welcome back. So we're gonna continue the Napoleonic War series by Epic History. I'll leave their stuff down in the description, and then up there, I believe. Hopefully, I'm correct. There's gonna be the playlist. I suggest you go check out the previous videos if you're not caught up, because they're very important to understand. Otherwise, we're taking a look today at the Battle of Friedland and Napoleon's defeat of Russia in 1807.
An Epic History TV History March collaboration, supported by our sponsor Skillshare, home of more than 22,000 online classes. Find out about our exclusive special offer at the end of the video. One week before Christmas 1806, French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte arrived in the Polish city of Warsaw, then part of Prussia. A year had passed since his great victory over the Austrians and Russians at Austerlitz, and 2 months since he'd hammered the Prussians at Jena. But Russia still had powerful forces in the field.
And then there's again after the Battle of Jena, the Prussian army basically fucking collapsed and retreated in every direction. So they have some reinforcements in Königsberg. But yeah, also the Polish partition between Russia, Austria, and Prussia, right? So that's why Poland doesn't exist, and that's why Warsaw is in the hands of the Prussians at this time. So basically 2 months have gone by, and they're basically just lining each other up, sizing each other up.
The most important of which was the Russian First Army, commanded by General Bennigsen. Napoleon would not be master of Europe until it was defeated, and Russia and Prussia forced to make peace. But that winter, Napoleon's first attempt to trap Bennigsen near Pultusk got bogged down in thick Polish mud. The Russians withdrew to Białystok. The French army, half-starved and frozen, was ordered into winter quarters. While in Warsaw, Napoleon began a famous affair with a...
And what he means by winter quarters, if you don't know, it basically you're fucking sitting out in the snow. So yeah, he gets to sit in Warsaw, but everyone else out here you see on this fucking major road, they're not sitting in fucking towns and villages, like in a hotel. Let's put it that way. No, they're sitting in their fucking tents, out in the middle. Not very good. Not very pleasant.
A young Polish noblewoman, Marie Walewska. In the late 18th century, the once mighty Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth had been swallowed up by its neighbours, Russia, Austria, and Prussia, in a series of annexations known as partitions. Until in 1795, a third and final partition wiped Poland off the map. Now,
and this is today why Poland doesn't have a very... It has a very nationalistic outlook on the world, is because, well, this is his history.
Now, Polish patriots looked to Napoleon as their saviour, praying that his victories against their occupiers would lead to the rebirth of a Polish state. Marie Walewska became Napoleon's mistress in order to further this cause.
Yes, so women playing a major part, not in the sense of having a lot of political power, but still having a significant political sway to get the Duchy of Warsaw started, and so Poland could have something. And there will be a lot of Polish troops that fight for Napoleon, though he'll even make one marshal. I think he's the only marshal of any nationality that's not French. He's going to be Polish. He'll make him a marshal of France. That's how valued the Poles were, especially their winged. They had the winged hussars, but they're called hussars now, for the Polish cavalry at this time, because they had lances, and they traced their roots back to the winged hussars of old.
Ordinary French soldiers, however, had little love for Poland. It was impoverished, freezing, and they missed home. Desertion rates soared. There were even 100 cases of suicide. Marshal Ney, commanding 6th Corps, sent patrols towards Heilsberg, looking for better quarters. What they found was...
And again, Heilsberg is an actual town. It's not, in the middle of a field and freezing your ass off.
were Russian and Prussian soldiers on the move. They'd stumbled into a surprise winter attack by Bennigsen. Napoleon quickly laid a trap for the Russian army, ordering Ney and Bernadotte to retreat and lure Bennigsen west, while he led the rest of the army north to fall on his flank and rear.
This all makes sense. Again, Bennigsen is trying to, destroy this part of the army and fight Napoleon. If these corps pull back and Napoleon goes out here, he's going to be able to cut his supply line. Once that's cut off, he has two choices. He can either try to break out or die. And if he tries to break out, he either goes west or east. And going west is not an option. So he's got to go east and fight Napoleon, which is exactly what Napoleon wants to try to do here.
But the Russians captured a French courier carrying the Emperor's orders to Marshal Bernadotte. Bennigsen, now warned of the trap, ordered a retreat, fighting a series of rearguard skirmishes against the pursuing French. But he refused to give up the city of Königsberg without a fight, and turned to give battle at Eylau.
What a massacre without any results. Marshal Ney in the Battle of Eylau. And that basically sums up the Battle of Eylau. Fighting in winter is not a very good idea, especially in fucking Eastern Europe.
The Battle of Eylau, fought over 2 days, was one of the most brutal of the Napoleonic Wars, fought in freezing conditions, with neither side backing down. Marshal Augereau's 7th Corps, advancing into the face of a snowstorm, lost its way and was cut to pieces by Russian cannon fire. 5 French Eagles were lost.
If you don't know what a French eagle is, it's one of those standards, okay? Now, an eagle, the eagle, again, is representing back all the way back to fucking Rome. Eagle cohorts, the imperial eagle. So each regiment, I'm not sure how it's distributed, but I'm pretty sure each regiment was given a regimental color, and that was the eagle. So that was your pride, and even today, I know the U.S. still does it. Maybe some European countries don't. I've heard vice versa, but the U.S. still has colored flags that we have all of our ribbons on, and we do carry them in the battle. And yeah, losing that is not no. You don't lose that. That is a big no. It's a symbol of pride for a unit. Also, they're fighting in February 7th and 8th. So I'm in Texas, which is about as far south as you can go in the United States. And February and January, it gets down to 30 here, 30 degrees Fahrenheit, so 0 Celsius. And that's about as cold as it gets. And last year, it didn't fucking snow. But in Europe, the winters are a hell of a lot worse than that.
Napoleon's army was only saved by a devastating massed cavalry charge by 10,000 horsemen, led by the fearless Marshal Murat, and remembered as one of the great cavalry charges in history.
And these are cuirassiers, so these guys actually do have body armor, kind of like old European knights. Front and back plate, and they have a helmet, and they charge with swords. Now, lances are just straight better, but the reason they use swords was, in theory, because they don't break, and you could, point them out, and long story short, lancers are fucking better. They figured that out again after this, but there's reasons why they used heavy cavalry sabers to cut people down and blah, blah, blah. But just know that this is the premier cavalry, or the heaviest cavalry possible the French have, is their French cuirassiers.
At Eylau, for the first time as emperor, Napoleon failed to win a clear victory on the battlefield. He and the Russians covered up the true scale of their losses, but both sides are estimated to have lost a third of their armies in the carnage.
Let's take a look at these cavalry numbers. So 6,000 French dead, 15,000 wounded, and 1,000 prisoners on their side, the attacking side. The Russians got 9,000 dead, 9,000 wounded, and they had 3,000 prisoners. Again, 1/3 of their army seems to armored right. Both sides would lie about these numbers because it's fucking pretty brutal. And it's the first time Napoleon doesn't win an actual victory on a field, which is pretty shocking, honestly. And the reason the Russians aren't taking that much more wounded is they're fighting defensively. And if you fight defensively, you usually have the advantage.
After the horrors of Eylau, both armies sought time to rest and recover. Meanwhile, the newly formed French 10th Corps under Marshal Lefebvre besieged Danzig, held by 13,000 Prussians under General Kalkreuth. The city came under heavy French bombardment and infantry assault. After 8 weeks, with no prospect of reinforcement, the Prussian garrison surrendered on the 27th of May. Napoleon's northern sea flank was now secure against any possible Russian landing.
Which is vital, because if you take Danzig, not only does it prevent a Russian landing, it's also a major supply hub. Like, your other supply hubs, Thorn, Boligostov, they're all far. Königsberg's under enemy control. Danzig is your only main supply line. You could probably either supply some cities down here. But again, having this major port also would help if you get some... because again, they control a lot of Germany, or West Germany at this point. Whatever, the Confederation of the Rhine out there, so they can get some supplies here. Again, and the Russians can't land, so double win.
The French Emperor now commanded an army 190,000 strong, against just 115,000 Russian and Prussian troops. But it was Bennigsen who moved first, launching a surprise attack against Ney's 6th Corps on the 5th of June. Ney conducted a brilliant fighting withdrawal and escaped.
A fighting withdrawal is basically, as it says, you're fighting but you're withdrawing at the same time. And it's actually not something that it does take a lot of skill to do that, because again, your units can run away if they feel like they're going to be overwhelmed, which they could at any time. To do tactical withdrawal takes actually a decent amount of skill.
Bennigsen, having lost the element of surprise, and with Napoleon advancing, retreated once more. 4 days later at Heilsberg, the French lost 10,000 men in a botched assault against Russian defences. But the Russians continued their retreat the next day. Napoleon thought Bennigsen would head north to Königsberg, but instead he retreated northeast, keeping to the east bank of the Eylau River.
Now, this river does two things. For Bennigsen, what it's doing is making it Napoleon either has to come over and fight him, and he's going to have the river to defend himself. Okay, that's the main reason he's the river on this side. Or Napoleon has to cross down here, and you'll fight him here. But if you keep retreating up here, he has to follow you. If he follows you and he wants to cross a bridge, you're going to have a significant advantage of basically the fight over a fucking bridge. But as we will learn, it is also a disadvantage, because if Bennigsen has to cross back over this river and Napoleon's on the other side, then Napoleon has the advantage of basically fighting on a side that they have to cross, and they get the fucking advantage because they can kill on the bridge.
So when Napoleon's army marched north, it was Marshal Lannes' Reserve Corps on his right flank that next encountered the Russian army, near the small town of Friedland.
Ride your horse into the ground if you have to, but tell the Emperor we're fighting the entire Russian army. Marshal Lannes to his aide-de-camp. His aide-de-camp, very simply, is one of his officers that he trusts that basically helps him around. One of his most trusted advisors, basically.
In the late afternoon of the 13th of June, Russian cavalry scouts informed General Bennigsen that they'd found a single French corps at Friedland. Bennigsen decided he had time to cross the Eylau River and smash this isolated corps.
And he's thinking this because, again, there's only one bridge, and this is only one corps. He has an entire army. He can afford to cross the entire river, at least he thinks at this time,
before the rest of the French army could arrive to save it. And he ordered his army to begin crossing the river. Marshal Lannes, commanding 16,000 men and facing 46,000 Russians, sent an urgent message to Napoleon.
You're about to see why I think he is one of the best marshals that Napoleon had. He's a really good marshal.
That he was under attack from the main Russian army. Then he fought a skillful delaying action, hiding the weakness of his force behind a large screen of skirmishers, while gradually yielding ground to the enemy.
Now, again, these skirmishers, people think they're like, oh, why don't you just fucking take cover? Why don't I just stand apart? Blah, 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 blah. That's exactly what the fuck they're doing. He's basically split his four, whatever he has down here. Don't know if they're regiments. I'm assuming they're divisions. And makes it basically fighting in skirmish formation. Big spread conceals how many troops you actually have. Because he doesn't have that fucking many. And this guard's really big. And he's fighting a defensive retreat, basically.
Lannes was still holding off the Russians as darkness fell. That night, Russian engineers built 3 pontoon bridges at Friedland to speed the movement of troops over the river.
If you don't know what pontoon bridges are, they're basically things that, think boats tied together and you can fucking go across. Basically think very simple bridges made by people in water to get other guys across. They're not very strong, but there it is.
But Bennigsen was taking a huge risk. If this turned into a major battle, his army would have to fight with its back to the river, and the steep banks of the Mill Stream dividing its left wing from its right. Bennigsen had also badly underestimated the speed at which Napoleon's Grande Armée would react.
So as he said, this is either a do or die. This army that Bennigsen has sent over the river, basically, it doesn't have an escape option. It has a single point, and if that point fails, they're all dead. And it's going to be very slow, so this entire army is not getting out at the same time. As he said, this river also divides the north and the south, which means they can't support each other mutually, which is going to be bad if they try to break a center line. If they try to break the center and go for Friedland, then there's literally nowhere for these guys up here to go. They can try to cross the river in the winter, which is not a very good idea, and maybe they can cross, but they're going to lose all their heavy equipment doing so. And again, they have nowhere to go, so they either fight or die or surrender.
The first French reinforcements arrived that night. The Emperor himself wasn't far behind.
We won't catch the enemy making a mistake like this twice. Napoleon arriving at Friedland, and he's damn right.
By dawn on the 14th of June, about 40,000 Russians had crossed to the west bank of the Eylau River. Bennigsen ordered an attack on the village of Heinrichsdorf to turn the French left flank. But French cavalry reinforcements, led by General Grouchy, intercepted the Russians. In more than an hour of charge and countercharge, the French horsemen finally drove the Russians back. Marshal Mortier's 8th Corps now arrived to reinforce the French centre.
And if you don't know what these symbols are, very quickly, these slash marks right here, cavalry, infantry, and then obviously these are fucking cannon.
In Sortlac Wood, General Oudinot's elite Grenadier Division fought stubbornly against Prince Bagration's left wing, but was outnumbered by the Russians and gradually pushed back.
They are doubly outnumbered, but he said they're grenadiers. Grenadiers at this time are the strongest, toughest, tallest people they have. So give them a good fucking fight.
Around noon on a sweltering day, Napoleon himself arrived. He was soon followed by 1st Corps, commanded by General Victor, standing in for the wounded Marshal Bernadotte, as well as Ney's 6th Corps and the Imperial Guard under Marshal Bessières.
So he's going to have a heavy right down here. His left is okay, but he's going to have a heavy right to punch through. My guess, punch through Friesland, cut this army off, they can't go anywhere. Also, I was wrong, it's not winter, so it's middle of spring, maybe summer. June, July, August, yeah, so summer. So you can at least cross the river, not freeze to death, but... Yeah.
The date, the 14th of June, held special significance for Napoleon. It was the 7th anniversary of his great victory over the Austrians at Marengo. A good omen, he declared.
And he almost lost Marengo. He references it in the movie Waterloo. He's like, I lost the battle at 6, but I won it back again at 7.
The battle then entered a lull, as Napoleon assessed the situation, saw Bennigsen's dangerous position, and issued orders for an attack to take advantage of it. Bennigsen, meanwhile, who was tormented by ill health throughout the day, saw that he now faced the full might of Napoleon's army.
You may ask why there's some, divisions out here that are just kind of standing the fuck around. It's very simple. They're the reserve elements, and they're also protecting things. So these cannons up here, right? They're on a fucking hillside, and they can shoot down here. These infantry are protecting basically this town, right? And then the cavalry out here is to support them and also counter any skirmishers out here. Bennigsen's out here, obviously you need some detachment to support him. And you have cavalry that are going to be protecting this bridge because they can easily maneuver over here to reinforce or fall back or do whatever.
And issued orders for a retreat.
This is the objective. Advance looking neither right nor left, and bore into that thick mass, cost what it may. Napoleon to Marshal Ney. And probably would need cost what it may, you need to take Friesland, whatever the fucking cost, to cut this army off. And as he said, Bennigsen ordered a retreat, but it's going to take time for this army to get across. And unless you pre-position units like defending this Eylau River right here, and then you position guys in front of Friesland, and you tell them to fucking stay there, and you tell them to dig in and hold the line while everyone else runs, it's not going to go well. This going to be fucking mass panic at this point, or it soon will be.
But before Bennigsen's retreat could get underway, at 5:30 p.m, 3 salvos from the French guns signalled the start of Napoleon's attack. It was led by Ney's 6th Corps on the right wing, who first cleared Bagration's infantry from Sortlack Wood. But as Ney's troops left the cover of the trees, they came under heavy fire from Russian cannon across the river. As the French attack faltered, Prince Bagration rallied his men and launched a cavalry counterattack. Ney's corps retreated. But now General Victor's 1st Corps came up on his left. Its artillery commander, General Senarmont, advanced with 30 guns and blasted the Russians at point-blank range with case shot.
Fucking case shot at that close range, it's like a shotgun of artillery shell. Will fucking kill everyone in its path. Damn good idea from that artillery commander to get that fucking close. It's dangerous to do so, but in this case it'll probably pay off.
Hundreds of Russians were mown down within minutes. Under this onslaught, Bagration's men began to waver and then retreat. Around 7 p.m, the Russian Imperial Guard launched a desperate counterattack to try to halt the French advance on Friedland.
And the reason they send the Imperial Guard is they're their best guys. And maybe that counterattack, maybe to try and hold this peninsula right here. He said this is a counterattack, so they're going to try and push them back because they need time to get this fucking units to start moving. But, I mean, it's not looking too good.
But they were outnumbered and outgunned. As exploding shells began to start fires in Friedland, the French centre and left wing joined the attack. With its only escape route under threat, the entire Russian army began a panicked retreat towards the river. But Friedland's houses and bridges were now ablaze. The town became a deadly trap for the Russians. Many were drowned trying to cross the river.
You can see here, this right-wing cavalry, they can get the fuck out of there. Usually, cavalrymen, if they run away, can usually get the fuck out of there because, one, they're on horses. And can just run away. Everyone else, if you're an infantry dude, which is like 90% of the armies back then, well, you're fucked. You can either ditch your equipment and try to swim across this fucking river, which, I mean, is probably what we would all fucking do. It's either that or get taken prisoner or die. And you're going to lose all of your equipment doing this. And none of your artillery guns. Again, the guns have been captured. You can't get any of these guns back. It's not happening.
Others killed or captured. North of Friedland, some units were able to escape across a ford or along the river bank. But there was no disguising the Russians' terrible defeat.
And I've actually managed to get a lot of their fucking people out, just looking at that.
The Battle of Friedland was one of the most decisive victories of Napoleon's career. At the cost of 10,000 casualties, he had inflicted twice as many losses on the Russians. About 20,000 men, killed, wounded or taken prisoner. 40% of Bennigsen's army. The Prussians abandoned Königsberg the next day, which was occupied by Soult's 4th Corps, while Bennigsen's shattered army retreated across the river Niemen into Russia. Tsar Alexander's advisors implored him to make peace with Napoleon. He accepted their advice, and a ceasefire was agreed.
And we're probably going to talk about Tsar Alexander if we ever actually get to the Congress of Vienna. He is not a very good man. Does whatever the fuck he wants, as you will soon probably find out in the series. He's not a very good emperor. Perhaps I was the happiest at Tilsit. I found myself victorious, dictating laws, having emperors and kings pay me court. Napoleon in exile on St. Helena. That's after he... That's, that's on his basically deathbed. That's, he's not on, now I can go.
Alexander and Napoleon met for the first time aboard a raft in the middle of the river Niemen, near Tilsit, and developed an immediate rapport. Tilsit proved to be one of history's great diplomatic summits, as the two emperors feted each other for days, with banquets, parades and concerts, then discussed affairs late into the night. A friendship of sorts developed, while Russia's former ally, King Frederick William of Prussia, was left out in the cold. And it was Prussia who would lose most in the Treaties of Tilsit, signed 2 weeks later.
Of course it was Prussia. It's always a person that's never fucking invited to the meeting. It was the Czechs during the Sudetenland crisis. They're like, what would you do? Why would we invite you? All you would do is like a fucking object to this. But yeah, apparently Alexander and Napoleon had actually a very good relationship. Later that goes sour, but at the beginning at least it was cordial and good.
1/3 of Prussian territory was taken away to create the new Kingdom of Westphalia, to be ruled by Napoleon's 22-year-old brother Jerome, and the Duchy of Warsaw, to be ruled by the King of Saxony, which Polish patriots hoped would prove a stepping stone on the road to their own state.
So Prussia lost 1/3 of their land, and that third is really important because this third is over here in the Rhineland, and this has always been the economic heart zone of Germany back then. So losing all of this part is very bad. Very bad. And the Kingdom of Westphalia, ruled by Napoleon's brother, he's going to do this, and it's going to come to bite him in the ass. He's trying to build a dynasty in Europe by putting Napoleon's, like, and putting him there, and then in Naples, and then in fucking Spain, and then Holland, and it all coming to bite him back in the asshole because they don't really know what the fuck they're doing, and he's just assigning them to his family because they're his family, not based on merit. And the Saxon king is going to rule over the Duchy of Warsaw. This does two things. Saxony and the Duchy of Warsaw are basically under him. That's why it's called the Duchy of Warsaw, because this is the Kingdom of Saxony. Kingdom, Duchy. Duchy's under kingdom, so therefore you can have them two. Both have, the king can rule over them both.
Polish troops were recruited into the Grande Armée, with Polish lancers even forming part of Napoleon's elite Imperial Guard.
They do, and they are very good cavalrymen.
Russia only had to give up the Ionian Islands, as Alexander accepted an alliance with Napoleon that left the French Emperor master of Europe.
In the Ionian Islands, you might well ask, why the fuck could you do that? Why does Russia have those? I don't really know. But this coast right here of Illyria, And these Ionian Islands are actually pretty economically important back then, because I mean they're economically development ports, because Ragusa is also over here. So it's not a major loss, but it's something for the French.
Alexander even agreed to join the Continental System, Napoleon's economic blockade of Great Britain, which banned British ships and goods from all French-controlled ports. The system had been established the previous winter by Napoleon's Berlin Decree. Napoleon hoped that by cutting off British trade with Europe, he'd cause financial chaos and political upheaval in Britain, allowing him to make a favourable peace.
In theory. Now, the Continental System has fucking problems, which I'll probably talk about in a minute if he doesn't talk about it.
There was just one problem. The Continental System didn't work.
Yep, it didn't work. And a very simple reason for that is back then, there was no really such a thing as the border guards maybe existed, but like police, no. And enforcing a treaty over this large of a span, in which the Royal Navy is the biggest fucking navy, is almost impossible. So Britain is able to smuggle all through here. And again, people want to trade for less. If they can make a stringy deal and maybe get better deals over here and get more money, they're going to do so. So smuggling was rampant throughout this entire Europe. Throughout the entirety of Europe, it was rampant. And it just makes sense. And yeah, the system's not going to work at all, really.
Problem. The Continental System didn't work. Not only was it impossible to enforce and undermined by widespread smuggling, the system damaged French trade just as much as British trade. The decisive weapon in this economic war would prove to be the British Royal Navy, which that summer ensured its continued naval dominance by launching a preemptive strike against the neutral Danish fleet at Copenhagen, capturing their warships before they could fall into Napoleon's hands.
Which they probably would have done. And yeah, the British will do this many times. And in World War II, they would do this to the French, their former allies, and be like, hand over the shit. And the stupid, retarded, absolutely dick-mongering French admiral was like, no, even though the British gave them like 4 options. Sail home to Britain, put them away in, or disarm them in American ports, return them to the Free French, or you can impound them in American harbors. Either of those options will work for us. But
Royal Navy squadrons blockaded all major French ports, seizing any ships trading with France, while ensuring British merchants could continue to trade overseas in relative safety. The Navy even seized the tiny Danish island of Heligoland as a base for smuggling British goods into Europe. But most disastrously for Napoleon, the Continental System would draw him into 2 conflicts that proved ruinous for his empire.
Russia and Spain, they're just his downfall, more or less.
The first would be fought in the Iberian Peninsula, where Napoleon decided to force Britain's ally, Portugal, to join the Continental System. In November 1807, French troops, supported by their Spanish ally, invaded the country. The Portuguese royal family fled to their colony of Brazil, as the French occupied Lisbon without a fight.
And this is what's really going to lead to most of Portugal's colonies declaring independence. I mean, if you don't have a master and he doesn't have shit, well, I mean, why not? It's one of the main reasons. I mean, they stay in Brazil for a while, and then after, wow, they just declare independence. Like, who the fuck is going to stop them? Your country's occupied. So.
It looked as though Napoleon had won yet another easy victory. But the Peninsular War was just beginning.
That is the end of the video there. So I hope you guys enjoyed my reaction to this series. We'll keep it going. Otherwise, check out my other videos if you like, and subscribe. Please subscribe. It does help. Leave a like too. Also, with that, I'll see you people next time.